Thank you, Ray. This is going to be a really interesting panel, and I think we've got some great panelists that you're going to learn some things from. It's called Lessons from the Edge. Mario Andretti, the race car driver, said, if you're not feeling out of control, you're not driving fast enough. And that's a great quote for entrepreneurs, because if you're running a business, if you're starting something, if you're relaxed and comfortable, if you don't feel like things are a little bit out of control, you're probably doing something terribly wrong, right? We live life on the edge as entrepreneurs, and we have to learn our lessons from those edges. How many of you have said failure is not an option? It's bullshit, right? Failure is definitely an option. In fact, failure is likely. Failure is not an objective, right? Nobody starts a business with the goal of failing. We all try to do something successful. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you're going to take chances and start businesses, you are going to experience failure at some point or another in your career. And the key is to learn from those failures, to grow from those failures, to not take it on the chin and go put your tail between your leg and give up, but to understand that that's part of the process, that's part of the learning, it's part of the game. So we've got some amazing entrepreneurs here to share some of their stories of when they were on the edge, right? When they looked failure in the eye and thought that, well, maybe it is an option, but I'm going to fix it, and they succeeded in fixing it. So I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists, and then I'll let them each speak, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions and comments. And I should have introduced myself. I'm Jeff Sass, CMO of .Club Domains, and at 3:30 this afternoon, I hope you'll come back and hear a presentation that I'll give. But right now, I want to introduce our panelists. So Colin Campbell is the CEO and founder of .Club Domains, my boss, so I have to give him a good introduction. But Colin is a serial entrepreneur, so he's been on the edge many times. He was one of the co-founders of Two Cows, which has gone on to become a leading force in the domain industry and now the telecom industry. Also, he was one of the founders of Hostopia, so he's got a strong background in the hosting and domain industry from that. Next to Colin is Barry Cates. Barry is the owner of Innovative Group, sorry. And I'll tell you, Barry is amazing, because when we needed to do something special, when we launched .Club, we decided to do an event with 50 Cent. And we actually hired Barry's company to help us organize that whole event. And we did a big press event in New York, which was pretty amazing. So Innovative Group specializes in customer-facing sales, marketing, event, and hospitality VIP services for over 40 years. And Barry and Colin know each other through EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And Barry is the past president of the Florida chapter of EO. And for any of you who are entrepreneurs, that's a great organization to look into. I've met many of their members over the years, and they're all amazing entrepreneurs with great stories to share. And then finally, I want to introduce George Verdugo. George is very known to many of you in the domain space. He's a serial entrepreneur as well, and he is one of the people who takes those great domain names and, like Brett was suggesting, builds real successful businesses around them. George, I'm happy to say, actually is the owner of Hotels.Club, and he'll be launching something pretty spectacular with that. He's also getting ready to launch Alligators.com with some amazing alligator products, high-end stuff. And he owns VisitSpace.com, which amazingly, when George acquired that name, you know, the idea of going to space seemed many years away. And when you look at what's happening today, it looks like it's going to be much sooner than that. So we'll all be wanting to go to VisitSpace.com and to space itself soon. So this is going to be great. With that, I'm going to introduce Colin and let him tell his lessons from the edge.
All right, thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go back in history a little bit here to a time many years ago. It was 1992 when I graduated from university, and I was very fortunate to graduate in a time at the very beginning of a new era called the internet. And right out of college, my brother and I, we started an internet company in Toronto called Internet Direct. And if you're Canadian, you might remember some of these names, but Internet Direct started out, right with a very small funding. I think mostly credit cards and a loan from my mother and some student loans, admittingly, which helped me get my funding for the initial business. And we started small, obviously, but very quickly, the demand for internet access in the early days with dial-up through the dial-up system was pretty high. So we had no issue whatsoever with respect to demand. It was unlimited. No bank would give us financing whatsoever. Nobody understood what the internet was. There wasn't a telecom touching the internet. So we were a real innovative company trying to come out and launch internet and connect people through the web and get them onto the web. And I mean, I can tell you funny stories, just going right back there and doing seminars with people to try to explain to them what the internet was. And one of the funniest things was I would go online. This was before the web actually came out. And I'd go online and we would email the White House and we'd get an autoresponder back. And it was like, wow. Everybody in the room was just amazed by it. So my brother and I started the company. We launched it. We did some really cool ads. We made it really fun in Toronto. And over the next 4 or 5 years, it became the largest internet service provider in Toronto. We started buying some companies across Canada. We became the largest service provider in Canada. We were larger than AOL in Canada, put it in perspective. And we decided to take it public. We took the company public in 97, thereabouts. It was like a penny stock at the time. I think it was trading at around 20 cents or 30 cents. And we, over 2 years of working on it, we were able to get the stock up to like 80 cents. And, it was worth probably, I don't know, at that time, probably around 20 or $30 million. Along the way, we were able to acquire the rights to a website called Two Cows. It was actually called Oo Cows, the ultimate collection of windsock software. And so we changed the name to Two Cows. And we added on some domain services revenue. We launched a domain company and a hosting company around it. And we were able to very quickly ramp that company up. And early on, 1998, we were able to sell that company to a group of Israelis, a billionaire from Israel who was behind ICQ. I don't know if you remember that name. But they came in, they bought the company in 21 days, paid all cash. It was like 30 million or so. And we were like living high. I'm telling you, it was like 26 years old. And it was just, the story there, I mean, I couldn't believe it because I was living in a very modest home and everything. And your whole life goes from this, very modest, save every cent, to all of a sudden you come home with this massive check. And I showed up about 2 in the morning. That's how long it took to close the deal. And I walked in. I was the one carrying the check. The first payment was $22 million. And I walked into my wife's bedroom and she wake her up and I said, look at this, look at this. She looks at me and she goes, I don't understand it. She couldn't understand the zeros and stuff. It's fascinating. So it's this public company. We're running the public company and we meet up with another billionaire, Charles Sirois, out of, and I'll name names here, out of Montreal. And he had the rights for all of the telecom, all the phone calls that left Canada. He had a monopoly, and a few other businesses as well, including a cable company. And he came to us and said, I'd like to merge my company with your company and apply for all the wireless license in Canada from the governments. And we did that, and we actually applied for the licenses, and we were awarded for no cost all of the 2.5 gigahertz licenses throughout Canada except for Manitoba. And if you understand licenses or wireless licenses, they're invaluable. Today that license is probably worth about $1 billion. We were able to get it for free, and you can imagine our stock now. So I was not CEO of the new entity. I took the position of Senior Vice President of Internet Services, continued to work on the company, and the stock, as you could imagine, started to rise. This was 1999. In fact, the stock, I think I had about 13% of the company at the time, and the stock rose to about $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion. And again, I'm 28 years old, right? So just a phenomenal, just rocket ship up. It was the dot-com boom, and it was phenomenal, and it felt great. And we were really beginning to enjoy life. Then, I guess on March 13th or thereabouts, we were raising $50 million for the company. And, in a secondary offering, they announced the breakup of Microsoft. I don't remember that. And the NASDAQ dropped from 5,000 to 4,000. So in our infinite wisdom, our backers said, no, let's wait until the NASDAQ comes back. Just came back to about 5,000 a few weeks ago, right? So they said, let's wait. So obviously NASDAQ went to 3,000 and then 2,000. Then I think the lowest was about 1,200 or 1,300. Which is phenomenal. It's unbelievable collapse in the NASDAQ and the dot-com crash there. Now, I had done something when we merged the companies for myself and for the people who worked for me, who all had options in the company. I think we had probably about 10 of the employees were worth well over $1 million. I think we got one of them back here, Howard. I apologize. I'm gonna, he knows what I'm talking about. When I tell the story, it's very painful. But the stock, it rose one day. It rose to as high as $19 a share. And when I had merged the companies, I had locked up the stock. We were in a lockup agreement on the stock, which is somewhat common for about a 2-year time frame. So literally, we had sold the company, we had the stock, but we're not allowed to sell the stock for up to 2 years. And it's sometimes done, and often companies will encourage entrepreneurs to do this so that they don't just bail out of the company and run away. And the stock went from 19, all of a sudden the crash is starting happening. The offering was pulled. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and within 18 months of that, by the time I was able to sell my stock, I sold all of it for 6 cents a share.
Wow.
I was just, it just destroyed me emotionally. I'm telling you, I think we all can relate to this in some ways. Obviously don't compare to our kids, but I'm going to use that analogy anyway. You work for 10 years on your baby. You focus on it. Like Morgan says, focus for 10 years, and you lose it all. And it was just so depressing. It was so hard to get up in the morning, to face it, to face Howard, for the decisions that I had made. I had lost him, his wealth, his 10 years of working at that company. I lost it all. And so the lesson that I learned from this, and I'm not saying this is a prescription for everyone. I know there are people who merge into companies, and then those companies turn into Ubers, and they become billionaires. I understand all that. But for me, it's liquidity or control, period. Every time I've been in charge of a company, and I'm the one in control, the company has done, not every time, but the companies generally do well. When I'm not in control, you have these corporate companies in control, and you're sitting in the back seat, and you're hoping for success, and you're hoping that they're going to succeed. You're hoping they're going to make the right decisions. Even though I was screaming those 2 years at the CEO and having nonstop fights with him about the decisions that were being made, I was in the back seat. So liquidity or control has become one of my mantras for all of my companies. So what did I do at that point? I'm like, okay, I just blew it. And by the way, this was public, it was on news, on the news station, the CNBC of Canada at the time. And I was, a little bit beat up. It was one of the biggest failures in telecom history in Canada. A lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of shareholders, obviously, lost a lot of money. And I know by American standards, it probably wasn't, that big of a drop, $1 billion, $1.5 billion, but, it was pretty big in Canada for, we're a smaller country. So at that point, it was, what did I love about building the company in the first place? What I loved is I loved the technology. I loved connecting people on the internet. So I started a company called Hostopia, and it was a wholesale provider of web hosting and email. And within a year, we got funding, a venture funding. Within 6 years, we took it public. And this time, a month before the Lehman Brothers crisis, we sold it for all cash, and this time was for $124 million. And so it was, I called it, I won't even say it here, but I called it Vinda-fucking-cation, because during that time, even the Hostopia, you couldn't believe how many people would pick up the phone, the stock's down, and the wars I had with partners that were out of control, and it was obviously a big roller coaster. And then all of a sudden, bang, we opened up at $4.55. The next day we opened up at $10.55 a share, and everybody made a killing on that company, and it felt great. The next company obviously was .club, and that was a whole other story, .club. But getting the licenses or the rights from ICANN, not too dissimilar to wireless licenses, was able to do that. This time I had to pay for it, and we got it in an auction. It was millions and millions of dollars, and we raised $11 million for .club. And right now, we're well on our way. We have almost 1 million domain names and over 100,000 live sites, and very excited about that company. So for me, the lesson was liquidity or control. Focus on what I really love doing, and that's what kept me going to get to the next stage on the way back. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. So, liquidity, control, and vindification, right? Okay, good. We'll remember that. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Barry Cates to share his lessons from the Edge. And then we'll have some time at the end to ask everyone questions.
I don't know why Colin asked me for money to pay for his valet parking after hearing that story today. I apologize, I lost my voice the other day, so bear with me on that. I grew up in Massachusetts, middle-class family, went to work. When my parents got divorced, moved here to South Florida at the age of 12, worked at Publix, making 85 cents an hour, all the way up until the time I graduated, where I made $2.10 an hour. At that $2.10 range, I was making $85 a week for 40 hours worth of work. So put myself through school at the University of Miami, ended up getting the job my sophomore year as the bud rep in college, which was the Mac Daddy job. I had a $25 beer expense allowance, and I got paid $25 a week, but I had a $100,000 marketing budget on campus. So you can imagine the kind of parties that I was able to throw on campus. And I was the last group that was grandfathered in, when the drinking age changed to 21. So freshmen could drink, sophomores could drink, and it was just a whole different time than it was. That actually turned into a 13-year career for me. I'd always had the entrepreneurial bug, though. So when I had left Budweiser, I actually went and helped build the track down in Homestead, because the guy who owned it was a guy named Ralph Sanchez. He was doing the race downtown, and all of downtown was getting rebuilt because of the new arena, Bayside, everything. So he tried to go to North Miami. The condo commandos fought him hard. Hurricane Andrew came in. City of Homestead said, hey, we'll give you all the land, because they were building some spring baseball facilities, and they all were decimated. So Ralph ends up building the track down there. He was looking for somebody who wasn't a motorhead that he could teach the racing business to, because he only wanted to work 2 days a week. So we get the track built. The next thing you know, the France family comes in and buys us. France family's all part of NASCAR. And Ralph got bought out, and here I was like, okay, well, now what am I gonna do? I got called from a headhunter. I went to work for Clear Channel. And what I did at Clear Channel was, I didn't sell radio, but we had a non-traditional revenue department. And basically what that meant was we did everything else but sell radio. It was another avenue for trying to raise money for the radio station at that time. So we would do big concerts, so the Zeta Fests of the world and the Lollapaloozas of the world, that was all radio station driven. And what I found, this was really the start of my entrepreneurial journey, what I found was that clients want your time. And in corporate culture, you spend 20, 30% of your time in meetings, and your clients want your time. So I had 5 clients that said, hey, listen, if you leave there, we will be the foundation for you to go ahead and start your own business. So this was 1999. And I want to let you know that Hooters was one of my first clients. Greatest company to work with, greatest company. I had also had Lucent Technologies, I had Diageo, I had Budweiser, and I actually had the Aventura Mall. So that started it. Got into marketing, got into events, got into VIP hospitality programs. We were doing Super Bowl, Masters. I mean, back in the heyday, I'm sure all of you know, Lucent Technology was a cash king. They would pay us $1 million to take 50 of their top people to Super Bowl. We'd fly everybody in via private jet. They'd stay at the Fairmont. We had a suite. I mean, my budget was $1 million for 50 people. Now you know why they're out of business, which is a disappointing situation for me on that side of things, but nevertheless, it was a great lesson learned. But when things started growing for me, I've always been a man of a handshake deal. One of the things that I learned from this business scenario that I'm going to share with you was that I decided to, from my core business of marketing and events, where some people like to invest in real estate or cars, I like to invest in the nightlife entertainment business, nightclubs. And a lot of it, I got that feeding from the time when I worked for Budweiser, because when you work for Budweiser, you go into any bar, restaurant, club, you're going in there and you're buying drinks for everybody. I loved what the nightlife experience did for changing people's days. So I chose to go into the nightlife business. One, because if you have a crappy day at work and then you come over, you're going to meet a great bartender, you're going to get a great drink, the environment's going to be great, and you're going to leave happy. And second of all, in the liquor business, it's very, very profitable. In our nightlife ventures, we do 97% liquor versus, most restaurants that are, a 50-50 mix between food and beverage, and liquor is very, very profitable, which is the reason why you see nightclubs do $50 million a year like Live and all of the other clubs that are in Vegas. I decided that I was going to be a big nightlife operator. And where am I going to go? I'm going to go to Vegas. So we got proposed this amazing deal. Partners were in Vegas. We're going to operate the deal. And we're 50-50. We shook on it. So comes time for us to get all of the dealings going. Got my money in. Project's off and running. And my clients or my partners, sorry, we don't have the money we said we were going to have. So I had signed on everything. In the meantime, I was still running my core business because that was the heartthrob of how I was able to actually do all of these extracurricular opportunities. So I started robbing my business because I had obligations. And again, failure for me was not an option. So I continued to rob Peter to pay Paul. And it finally got to the point where the noose was so high around my neck, I'd cashed in my IRA. I'd cashed in everything that I had. I had rolled my entire life into this Vegas project. And I was still $1.5 million short. And I finally said, I gotta cut the cord. Devastating. Coming to that conclusion and decision, just devastating. So the lesson that I learned from that piece was partnership agreement up first. Regardless of they're your best friend, your family member, partnership agreement up first. And second of all the money in the bank. Any partner who's committing with you, have them put their money up. Because I knew that they were going to, or I had believed that they were going to do it. I certainly had every intention of doing it. So get it in writing first, get all the terms done, and then get the money in the back. So in EO, we have what's called a forum. Forum are EO peers, and it's a small group of 6 to 8 people, and it's almost like your board of directors, not only from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. So as I was going through this 3 years of hell, my forum was there to help me navigate and figure out my plan for where my next steps were. And you know what they all said was, look, you've done an amazing job building your business from 1999. Stay focused on just your business. Just work back in your business and do the things that you're great at. And I'm proud to say that 3 years ago, right after coming out of this crash, I was at 8 employees. And last payroll, I was at 146 employees. I just created 2 brand new companies. I just bought another company for $1.5 million. And the nightclub business for me is just a place to go and have a cocktail. So I just share with you is that if you're really good at something, just take 100% of that time and invest that time in that, because all of the derivatives will pay off of that. And secondly, if you're doing a deal, handshakes aren't going to work anymore these days. Make sure that it's all outlined in writing. And third, if partners are coming into the deal, have the cash in the bank. So I hope that this shared a couple nuggets for you guys. And you know what? If you can dream it, you can achieve it. So thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. That was great. So lessons from Barry from The Edge. Focus on what you're really good at, get it in writing, and make sure the money's in the bank. Some good lessons. So now our final speaker is George. And I'll introduce George, and he can tell you some of his lessons from The Edge. Come on, George.
How you guys doing? Well, you guys know my name. My name is George Verdugo. I grew up in East LA, in one of the rough areas of East LA. You know, I saw a lot of crazy stuff. But I worked when I was living in East LA, I got hired when I first saw the internet was in 1989. I got hired by a Jewish guy who put me in sales, and we sold commissary supplies to the commissaries in the prisons. And I remember having a computer there. It was weird. I mean, I never saw a computer in my life. He told me to register this name, and I registered this name for him. But I didn't really catch the whole concept of the internet at that time. It was just like, it was something new. Fast forward, 1996, I sold antiques for a living in Los Angeles. So I would, buy these estates and bring them and take them to, I had an antique store in the town of Whittier, and I would always have these Japanese people. All the Japanese people would buy all my stuff. And I know what they were doing. They were buying it so they could reproduce it over there and make a reproduction of it. And that's what they were doing. And at the time, there was this one lady that was like buying, like she was, I'll just buy everything. I said, whoa, what the heck? I mean, I haven't even opened up and you're going to say you're going to buy all my stuff? And I go, what do you do with this? She goes, I put it on eBay, 1996. eBay? What's eBay? And I was like, wow. And he goes, yeah, remember those little penguins I sold you for, you sold for $10, whatever? I sold it for 90 on eBay. I go, oh my God, what's going on here, And so I started looking at the internet again in 1996. And then, living in Los Angeles is a really busy place to live at. You can't really focus in LA because there's so much things to do. And then I went through a divorce, and so I just went, it was over. I just lost focus. I had my kids. Fast forward 2000, I moved to Kansas City. I wanted to get away from LA. I said, I need to move somewhere else. I was young. I was 35 years old at the time. So I moved to Kansas City, started over. And again, I found the internet again. I started working for FreightQuote.com. I don't know if how many have ever heard of FreightQuote.com. Well, they're a big freight company that sells online. They just sold to C.H. Robinson for like $145 million. I started working there, and that's when I saw the power of the .com. It just right there and then I started buying names, and I began to go forward with them. I made a lot of mistakes. I guess at the time when I started, there was not a lot of events like this. There was no forums really. It was just like you were just blindly buying things, And I remember I did make some dumb mistakes in the beginning. So as time began to evolve in Kansas City, since I couldn't sell antiques like I did in LA, I tried to do it in Kansas City, and people weren't paying me as much in Kansas City for it. So I had to find another niche. So what I did was I started doing real estate. And I bought the domain, which is sevendeporeldueño.com, which is for sale by owner.com in Spanish. And I launched it. And so when I launched it, I didn't realize, how the Hispanic people were going to get online, because like I said, a lot of Latin America, they're not really online yet. There's a lot of struggles right now in Latin America. So, but I bought the domain, I used it locally in my local market, and it just exploded. I was like, oh my God, I hit a niche there. All these people are calling me, I need a house, I need a for sale by owner. Because a lot of the Hispanic people cannot qualify with banks. So they wanted something to deal with the owner. They wanted the owner finance sector. And so anyways, I began to do that for 2 years, did very well. And then I switch focus. One of the guys that I connected with said, look, I want you to be the CEO of my company, which was GS Foods. So I said, okay, I'll take over the company. So I took over the GS Foods, and what they did, they sold Latin products to all the Latin stores in Kansas City. So we took it over, and then I ended up buying Seafoods.Asia, and we went to China to start importing seafood from China to the United States. So we're in the process of buying mariscos.com, which is seafoods.com in Spanish, and we were doing really well, and all of a sudden, the company crashed, man. I don't know what happened there. It was a lot of stuff to do with the product that was coming in. And so I had to like say, wait a minute, I kind of switched focus. I couldn't do Se Vende por el Dueño no more because I lost the momentum. And so I had to reinvent myself. And so I'll never forget, it was 2011, and I got to get back in real estate, but I need a premium name. And you know how hard it is to get the premium names in real estate. So I'll never forget it, man. I was working for a company. I went back to work, and I saw this domain called casasbaratas.com. And so I told my wife, hey, I need to get this name. How much is it? She goes, are you crazy? You're going to dump all your money on something that's invisible? She didn't understand. I had glimpses of it, but she didn't understand. I said, well, I'm going to buy it. It was November, Christmas coming up, gifts and all that. And I took the risk and I bought the name. And that name changed my life, literally. I mean, what happened when I bought the name, since I lived in Kansas City has like really cheap houses over there. So I was able to connect with all the investors, use my platform, and they paid me finder's fees for every property that's sold on there. So my network grew from 0. Now we have over 76,000 people following me on Facebook now, and another 12,000 on Twitter. And all I do all day is just upload the house, and they sell, and I get paid for really doing it nothing. And so with that domain, I began to buy real estate. And so I started buying houses. I probably own about 25 houses now, but I try to create a cash flow because, like I said, internet is risky. The guy who developed my site was one of the top internet guys in Spain. They own descuentos.com, which is discounts.com. And he did a really cool WordPress site with Casas Baratas. It's a pretty cool site. And so as I began to go forward with that domain, Casas Baratas, I began to, like I said, do the cash flow, and I started looking for other niche markets. And since I grew up in sales my whole life, since I was a little kid, I would sell yo-yos and, whatever. I just did sales everywhere. So I started surrounding names around sales from my platforms, alligators.com, then Visit Space is a form of sales, and some other domains that I have in the Spanish market, because I really do more in the Spanish market. And so in the whole process of losing everything, in that sense, kind of failing and trying to get back up, it's really the hardest thing to do. Is it kind of breaks you down, morally, mentally. It's like, man, I failed. But I knew what the internet was about. I got a taste of it, and I knew that it was going to be it's a powerful thing. I said, if Freight Quote could do it, I'm not as big as like some of these guys. They're doing very well, but I'm on the upswing right now, and everything's looking good. And so now, I ended up buying a lot of the real estate. I kind of locked up the real estate market in Kansas City, so I'm selling a lot of my real estate Kansas City domains. And so then now I ended up found another niche, and I bought hotels.club. And so with that, I like the extensions, but club is one of my favorites, and the .uno is also one of my favorites. But it's you got to find the right specific niche for your product, and hotels.club, it's gonna rock a lot of you guys. The prices on there are dumb. They're better than Trivago, better than Priceline, better than all of them on the internet. We did test runs, and none of those guys could beat us on the prices on hotels.club. But you have to be a member, of course. But in going back to you guys, if you guys have failed, or you guys are in the process of maybe don't know what to do, you need get your website going or do your marketing. My advice is that always have a mind of reinventing yourself, because there's a lot of things happen, and you have to go to the next thing. I always try to stay ahead of the game. That's why I bought visitspace.com. I was ahead of the game in buying some other domains that I have, because, I don't know what's going to happen next. So, I went through a lot of stuff in my life pertaining to the internet, and like I said, it was some bad times, but now everything's going good. And, if I encourage you guys, don't stop, keep that entrepreneurial spirit in you. and you could do it, man. You know, just pick your niche market. Like what he said, just be good. And what you have and what you do, just stay in that and do it, and it'll grow. You'll make it grow because your passion's there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, George. So those are 3 great stories from 3 great entrepreneurs, and George, reiterated, focus on what you're good at. Pick your niche. I think, from George's story we saw, he focused on the Hispanic market. He focused on real estate. He found certain niches where he could really shine and stand out from others. So that's a good lesson there. So I think, Ray, we have a few minutes for questions for any of our panelists. So take this opportunity to talk to these great entrepreneurs. Any questions? Come on, someone has a question. Yes.
Do you guys invest in other companies?
I do. I do invest in other companies. I focus on a formula, though, that's fairly tight, and I don't vary from that. So it's not a lot of types of companies I invest in, but I have done a number of angel investments in companies where I know that the ingredients and the formula, which includes the people, the money, the story, and the systems, have all been worked out.
I would suggest I invest in people. So I'd rather spend a lot of money and bring in the best talent, because those best talent, what I found in my experience, is that they can do the job right. They can grow your own company exponentially versus you taking a risk in somebody else's company. So I'd rather put the money in people.
I'm not there yet, but I will be one day.
Yes, Kate.
Yeah, so I want to hear, the startups and whatever, so I want to hear about your most depressing time when you didn't have money and you felt like committing suicide, because these are things that people don't talk about. I'm serious,
Yeah.
The reason why I say this is because I like to, unveil the cover that's out there. I have 5 friends that I knew personally that did do that. So I like to talk about all the fun stuff that happens, right? But I also like to talk about the bad stuff that happens. So what's your reality moment, and did you express it with other people?
So for me, I never had thoughts of committing suicide, because I always realized what was the worst thing that was ever going to happen to me was that I would be homeless, right? But then, knowing the network of friends that I have and my family, I knew that that would never be the case. So for me, the downside for me was when I literally didn't know how I was going to make my next payment. And not only that, though, I have a 2-year-old kid now, too. So I have a 2-year-old kid and 2 12-year-old daughters. So for me, there was never an opportunity, for me anyway, that taking my own life was never going to be the case because of just the surroundings that I have with my EO peers and my family.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean, so I just meant the depression, like, you were able to talk about it. And what are people doing today? Because it's something that's not talked about in the industry.
I think, listen, I was very open with it, because I think when you shelter those feelings, that's, I think, where probably the despair comes in at a greater moment. So for me, having my forum and my family being able to, everybody saw me going through it. I lost all this weight I couldn't eat. I was just trying to figure out all that crap. So once you can accept it, losing millions and millions of dollars is never an easy task. But once you conquer it, it takes a little time, but you do get over that.
Wait, you can lose weight?
Yes, you can lose a lot of weight.
I need to know. I think, and that's a great thought there, because I guess there is people that, that put everything on the line, especially when you're trying to start something and it fails, and I know I went through a big depression myself when all that stuff took place with me, but with me, it wasn't really that option, because I had 6 kids, and I was a single father with 4 boys, and so I knew they had to be there for me. I had to be there for them. But also, too, I think what helped me during that time of being, when I failed at that time, was the domain community, because I said, you know what, a lot of these guys that failed, if they could bounce back, I could bounce back. So I've always had that attitude, through the exampleship of some of the domainers here in the industry. But like I said, I had some really rough times, but, I just kept persevering, and you have to stay focused. That's the only way, you could overcome that. If there's anybody in here, if you have those thoughts, I recommend that you seek counseling or talk to somebody, because you can't, man. You're valuable. Believe it or not, you're very unique and you're very valuable. I don't care what religion, I don't care what gender you are. You're a very valuable person, and you have something to offer somebody else. And if you do go through it, try to reach out and help somebody else also. And that's, my advice.
Great. Thank you, George.
George will also give you a hotel room. So don't worry about that for a vacation. He's going to give you a vacation.
Everybody's going to say, oh, no.
Very good. Well, thankfully, I wasn't one of the many who jumped from buildings from the dot-com crash.
Yeah, wow.
It's obviously you lose all your investors' money, you lose your reputation, you lose your employees' wealth, and it's obviously it was very, very hard to go through all of that. However, there were, I think, two things that really got me through, and one of them was the passion I talked about earlier, but the other one was, and Barry mentioned it earlier, is the organization that I belong to, Entrepreneurs Organization, where we have a forum of these people who become your best friends and your confidants, and you can share openly in a safe environment. And in Toronto, I belong to a forum, and actually, it's interesting because he's now sitting back there, Norm Farrar, and he runs Soap.Club, and he came in for this convention, and we're very good friends. But he and a number of other people helped me get through the painful side of all of that and really begin to remind me of what I really loved about the internet and the businesses I was doing to get me back on track, because it does eat you up. I mean, it is like a disease. Like, you keep thinking about, I could have done this. I must have said it 1,000 times. I could have done it this way. I could have done it that way. I should have, so many times I think, and every once in a while I'll be like in a bar or something, somebody brings it up and it'll be like spontaneous combustion. It'll happen all over again. It doesn't go away. It's still there. Deep down, that pain it's there. It's like, it's like losing a child, and it's not, obviously not, but it's your baby, and you've worked so hard on it and you've lost it. But thankfully, I was not one of the dot-com jumpers. Right.
But I think that just going back to the lessons from the edge, that's the whole point. As an entrepreneur, you're going to be faced with situations when you're going to feel like you're on the edge. But these are examples of great entrepreneurs who've come back from that. And there's always the next step, and there's always a future ahead of you. And I think it's learning from those times when things are not going as planned, and learning from those times when you're on the edge that help you move through it. And of course, having support of family, friends, and associates is important. You can't keep it in. You can't do it by yourself. So any final questions before we wrap up for lunch? I know everyone's hungry. Yes? What I'll just repeat it in case anyone here. What do you guys think is the next great opportunity?
Well, it's great. If you're here on Tuesday 9 a.m., I'm giving a talk on virtually this and starting companies amongst paradigm shifts or regulatory change. And I really believe that those are the times and opportunities where entrepreneurs can seize opportunities that big companies are too afraid to, risk averse, and don't really want to take the risk, doing. So if you're here on Tuesday, I get really deep into that topic. I do believe that there are a number of paradigm shifts that happen all of the time, all around us. Personally, I drive a Model X, and it's self-driving. I drove here 90%. It drove on the way. I have the fastest internet in my house. I'm always trying to live in the future. I really believe there are applications for drones. We see Boca Raton, we see Magic Leap. They're doing augmented reality. I was traveling in Normandy, and I went to a museum, and it was just a very boring sort of museum with a 20-minute little video. And I said, wow, wouldn't it be neat to walk on the beaches of Normandy with glasses and actually see the invasion? That's coming. That's coming very fast. And there are entrepreneurs, and there are ideas, and there are paradigm shifts happening constantly. And as entrepreneurs seizing on them, and as domain investors getting the right domain names and getting them ahead of time to visit space, those are the opportunities for us, because the big corporations are asleep at the wheel.
Yep. Yes?
Did you say your car drove here?
Yes, I did. It's the new Model X. It drove 90% of the way. I still had to make the turns and stop at the red lights, but otherwise it drove here. And Norm, I had him driving last night because I had a couple cocktails. But he was afraid to let the car take control. There's a lot of human, issues when you're in a self-driving vehicle, because you're thinking, you're paranoid of the way it behaves. It behaves like a computer, but it doesn't behave like a human. And it's interesting that the Tesla's got to begin to understand more about the human behavior elements of being in a self-driving car. It can't turn right now, not yet. They're looking at upgrading it in a couple weeks, though.
And it doesn't pay for valet parking either.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time, and have a good lunch.
That was amazing. Thank you. A few housekeeping things. We'll be coming back here at 2:30 for the next session. And is that good, Cliff? And also make sure to visit the booths. There's giveaways at the booths. .club is giving away domain names, and .gdn is giving away a domain name and free hosting. So please go see .gdn, and they can teach you more about what their extension is. Thank you.
Can I have your attention, folks, for just a second? Folks over here on the side, if you can hold it down for a second, please. This is a little public service announcement. Okay, everybody is here for Startup Saturday, and that's great. It's part of the Domain Conference, as you probably already know. If anybody is interested in attending the rest of the conference, we have discounted rates for everybody who has come to Startup Saturday. So you can see any of the ladies at the front desk. We'll be glad to sign you up. And if you can only make one day, like Monday or Tuesday, we do have one-day passes available as well. So I just wanted you to be aware, if you look at your program, you can see a lot of good content for the rest of the show, and we'd love to have you. Thanks for all for coming, and we're going to break until 2:30. Thank you.
Right now, the window is closed right now. So I can't open up the other.